Elijah Cross wasn't looking to be a hero. He was just passing through Silver Hollow, a quiet cowboy with dust on his boots and no intention of staying long. But some towns don't let you ride past. Some troubles pull you in before you can blink. Outside the post office, he met Ava Talbot, sharp-eyed, grease-smudged, and fixing a busted wheel with more grit than most men. She said little, but her silence spoke volumes. That same night, Elijah saw a foreclosure notice nailed to her ranch gate, and overheard something worse. A deputy claimed the loan never belonged to her at all. Now, in a town run by fear and bought loyalty, one cowboy finds himself standing between a stubborn woman and a corrupt banker with land in his teeth. What starts as a stop for a horseshoe becomes a fight for something deeper: honor, decency, and the kind of justice that don't come easy. Will Elijah walk away, or dig in his boot heels and make Silver Hollow remember what a real cowboy stands for? If you still believe truth rides taller than lies, saddle up and hit that subscribe button. This ride's just getting started. Elijah Cross rode into Silver Hollow with the kind of ease that only comes from too many miles and too few routes. The sun was just cresting the hills behind him, casting long shadows across the dusty main road. His horse, a gray gelding named Jasper, limped slightly, favoring a worn shoe that had seen one trail too many. He pulled up beside the blacksmith's barn, slid down from the saddle, and tied Jasper to a post. "Let's get you fixed up, old boy," he muttered, patting the horse's neck. The town looked small but lived in, storefronts with hand-painted signs, hitch rails worn smooth, and a church steeple rising just beyond the rooftops. Everything felt quiet, too quiet, like the whole place was holding its breath. He was brushing dust from his coat when he noticed her. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, was crouched by a busted wagon just outside the post office. She had her sleeves rolled up, one boot planted firm against a wheel hub, and grease on her cheek. She didn't look up when Elijah approached, just kept twisting a wrench with stubborn precision. "You need a hand there, miss?" She glanced up, eyes sharp under a straw hat. "Got two already." Elijah chuckled. Fair enough. He leaned against the post, watching as she wrestled the bolt free. The wheel popped loose, and she exhaled hard. "Elijah Cross," he offered, tipping his hat. "Ava Talbot," she replied, wiping her hands on a rag. "You passing through or looking to stay?" "Just a stop." Jasper threw a shoe out near Dry Ridge. "Blacksmith's decent. Just don't let him sell you on his new technique. He'll charge double for the same hammer." Elijah smiled. He liked her already. That evening, with Jasper freshly shoed and the heat easing off, Elijah took a slow walk down the road past a spread of open pasture that caught the last of the sun. A wooden gate stood at the edge of the Talbot ranch, the paint peeling but the hinges clean. A single lantern flickered near the front porch. Then he saw it. Tacked to the gate in bold official lettering: "Notice of foreclosure. Due within 30 days. Property to be reclaimed by First Silver Bank." His jaw tightened. He glanced toward the house. Lights were off now, the quiet settling back in. As he turned to head back to the inn, he heard voices near the dry goods store across the road. Two men, both in deputy hats, leaned beside the delivery crates, laughing low. "Was never her loan to begin with," one said. "Paperwork's a mess. Her old man passed before the last payment cleared." "She don't stand a chance," the other chuckled. "Vaughn's got it all locked down. No judge in this town'll fight him." Elijah paused just long enough for the words to settle. He didn't know who Vaughn was, but he knew the sound of something sour. He walked on, quiet as a shadow. Later that night, in his small rented room above the livery, Elijah sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the boots he hadn't bothered to remove. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the shutters. The sounds of town faded, but those words didn't. Never her loan to begin with. He wasn't sure why it stuck. Maybe it was the grease on her cheek, or the fire in her voice when she warned him about the blacksmith's new technique. Maybe it was because Elijah had seen this kind of story before. Small towns with big names stomping out what little good was left. He leaned back, arms crossed, eyes locked on the ceiling. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he had a feeling it might have found him anyway. Next morning, he'd ride back past the Talbot gate, and take a longer look at that notice. Some things a cowboy just couldn't ride past. The next morning, Elijah Cross rode back toward the Talbot place before breakfast. Smoke had even risen from the chimneys. The dew was still clinging to the tall grass, and Jasper's hooves made soft prints in the mud along the creek road. As he approached the gate, that foreclosure notice still flapped in the breeze, its bold ink now blurred by morning mist. Ava was already up, pitchfork in hand, spreading hay in the front corral. She wore the same stubborn look he'd seen yesterday, chin high, mouth tight, eyes focused like a hawk on the horizon. "You're back early," she said, not looking up. "I sleep better when my conscience is clear," Elijah replied, dismounting. "That notice still bothering you?" Ava stopped. Her shoulders dipped just a little, then straightened again. "It's not a mistake, if that's what you're wondering. I heard otherwise." She looked at him then, guarded but curious. "From who?" "Two deputies talking careless. Said the loan papers might not be yours to lose." Ava tossed the last of the hay and leaned on the pitchfork. "My father refinanced before he passed. Said it'd keep us afloat till calf season. But now Banker Vorn says the final payment was never filed. Claims Pa forged it. I've got 30 days to leave or be removed." "Silas Vorn," Elijah said, tasting the name like it was sour milk. Ava nodded. "He owns the bank, and the mayor, and probably the judge too." "You fightin' this alone?" Her face hardened. "Ain't got much choice." Elijah tipped his hat back and scanned the property. "I rode down past the ridge. The creek looks dry. Always been that way?" "No," she said quickly. "It started drying up a few weeks ago. I hiked it last Sunday. Someone dammed it near the slope. Rocks and brush all stacked like a beaver with bad intentions." "That water feed your pasture?" "Yeah," she said softly. "And now the cattle won't graze. Half are losing weight already." Elijah frowned. "You sure that's legal?" She laughed once, bitter. "Legal don't mean much when the man breaking the law writes it too." He stepped forward. "I know someone who might help. An old friend used to work water lines and soil surveys. Name's Niels, lives just west of Deerfield. He don't ride much anymore, but he knows land like folks know their own kin." Ava studied him. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Cross?" Elijah paused. "Because I've seen this before. Land worth more than a name, and some man with paper trying to buy it for nothing. You don't deserve that." She didn't smile, but she didn't argue either. 2 days later, Elijah rode up to a leaning farmhouse where the shutters swung loose and the porch creaked with age. Niels Anderson sat in a rocker, long white beard down to his collar, and a cracked ledger on his lap. "Elijah Cross," the old man drawled. "Ain't you supposed to be halfway to Nevada by now?" "Plans changed." Niels grinned. "They always do." Elijah told him everything, about Ava, the creek, the foreclosure, the dam. Niels squinted. "Silas Vorn, huh? That old snake still poisoning wells with ink?" Elijah nodded. "You think he's behind the dam?" "No question. I remember that spring, natural flow down through Talbot's Ridge. Vorn's tried to reclassify that water as seasonal for years. If he blocked it, he's falsifying property value." "You still got the original maps?" Niels reached beside his chair and pulled a cracked tube. Inside, hand-drawn maps from 3 decades back. He unrolled one with trembling fingers. "There," he said, pointing. "You see that pencil line? That's the original creek bed. It's been erased, but not well." Elijah traced the path with his finger. "It runs straight through her land." "Exactly." Niels rolled the map tight. "You be careful, Elijah. Men like Vorn don't play fair when they start to lose." "I never asked them to." As Elijah packed the map into his saddlebag, the wind kicked up behind him, scattering dust across the trail. Tomorrow, he'd ride back to Ava with a map and the first spark of proof. Elijah rode back into Silver Hollow just as the sun tipped over the roof of the general store, casting long, golden shadows across the square. Tucked in his saddlebag was Niels's worn map, paper-thin but packed with truth. He'd barely slept the night before, too busy thinking about creek lines and forged claims. Truth was, the whole thing stank worse than a cow trough in August. He found Ava near the barn, trying to coax a sickly calf to drink from a trough that was nearly dry. "Elijah," she said, straightening up, brushing dust from her skirt, "you find anything?" He dismounted and pulled the map from his saddlebag. "I did. This here's from Neil's, hand-drawn survey from '72. Shows the original path of the spring. Vaughan's new boundary cuts it out, but look here. See this faint pencil line?" Ava squinted. "It runs straight through the pasture. Right where the dam started." She folded her arms. "So we've got a map. Vaughan'll say it's old, out of date. Which is why we need more than just drawings." She hesitated. "My father, he kept a sealed box in the root cellar. Said it was for hard times or worse. I never opened it after he passed. Didn't feel right." Elijah nodded. "Maybe now's the time." They crossed the yard together, down to the worn wooden doors behind the house. The hinges groaned as Elijah lifted them. Cool air and the scent of earth drifted up. Ava led the way down the stone steps, holding a lantern as Elijah followed. In the back corner, under a tarp and 3 flour sacks, was an iron box, edges rusted, but still locked tight. Ava knelt. Her fingers shook just a little as she turned the key that had hung on a nail in the kitchen since childhood. The lid creaked open. Inside, yellowed papers, folded deeds, and a sealed envelope bearing the mark of a notary from 1871. Ava drew in a breath. "That's Pa's handwriting." Elijah carefully lifted the deed. "This isn't just a land claim," he said, scanning the faded script. "It includes water rights, specifically tied to the spring running through this property. And look here." He pointed to the notary seal. "Original. Wax intact. That's something Vaughan can't forge." They brought everything back to the kitchen table, spreading out the documents like puzzle pieces. Among them, Elijah found the bank's lien notice, sent just 2 months before. Something about it made his skin crawl. "Mind if I keep this?" he asked, holding the notice up. "It's yours," Ava replied. "You think it's fake?" "Not the whole thing, just the seal." He rode into town later that day, past the shuttered sheriff's office and the church bell that hadn't rung since Christmas. Instead of stopping at the bank, he went 2 doors down to the office of Maureen Keller, Silver Hollow's only public notary. She was a wiry woman with quick eyes and an even quicker tongue. "Mind taking a look at this seal?" Elijah asked, laying the lien on her desk. She frowned. "That's supposed to be mine?" "Says so, but it don't look right." She took out her stamp and ink pad. Side by side, the difference was clear. The font was off, the border uneven. "This is a fake," Maureen said, tapping the page, "and whoever copied it didn't do a good job." Elijah tipped his hat. "Appreciate your time." Back at the Talbot Ranch, he handed the paper to Ava. "That lien. They faked the seal." She looked from him to the forged notice. "So they never had the right to foreclose?" "Not legally." Ava stared at the field, where the last of her cattle grazed under a pale sky. "We've got the creek line, the original deed, and proof of forgery. We're getting close," Elijah said. "But if we're going to take Vaughan down, we'll have to do it where folks are watching." Her eyes narrowed with fire. "Then let's give them something to watch." Tomorrow was the town rodeo, and neither of them planned to blend in. The Silver Hollow Rodeo was the kind of event that turned a dusty, divided town into a full-on spectacle. Main Street had been cleared, flags strung between hitch posts, and wagons lined up like pews around a dirt ring. Folks came out in their Sunday shirts and dusted boots, ready for broncs, biscuits, and a chance to forget the weight of land debts and dying creeks. Elijah Cross didn't show up to be seen. He showed up to win. He'd registered for the bronc ride under his real name, but few folks in town knew it yet. Just another lean cowboy in a brimmed hat, quiet and deliberate, keeping to himself near the holding pens. Ava Talbot sat near the front of the crowd, her father's deed and water rights tucked inside a canvas satchel beneath her seat. She didn't speak much either, but she watched everything, especially the small stage where Silas Vaughan stood in a fine coat, smiling like he'd already won the day. Folks, Vorn boomed to the crowd, we're ushering in a new chapter for Silver Hollow. Today I'm proud to announce a redevelopment plan to consolidate underutilized land and attract cattle feed contracts from the northern rail lines. Progress is coming, and this town's going to be at the center of it. A few polite claps broke out, but most folks just blinked, their excitement cooling. Vorn spread his arms wide. We're offering buyouts, fair rates, clean titles. We're not taking anything, just helping people move forward. Ava stood. Her voice, clear and sharp, cut across the murmurs. Does that include the land you're trying to steal? All heads turned. She held the rolled deed high, stepping forward onto the edge of the arena. My family's land was never for sale, she said, louder now. And the deed says the spring you damned is ours by law. I've got proof, signed, sealed, and notarized. Your lien is forged. Vorn's smile tightened. Miss Talbot, perhaps this isn't the time or place. Elijah, she said, turning slightly. You ready? He mounted the bronc without a word. The gate swung open. The horse bucked like fury itself, legs kicking high and fast. Elijah stayed tight, boots planted, hat low, the kind of calm that looks like poetry to anyone paying attention. 8 seconds. 10. Then he flew free, landed clean, and stood without even brushing his coat. The crowd erupted. Whispers started swirling. Who is he? Is that the man helping Ava? Did you hear about the spring? Vorn turned to one of his aides and hissed something under his breath, but the seed had been planted. As the crowd spilled into the food, tents and hay bale seating, Elijah walked toward Ava. She met him halfway. You didn't say you could ride like that, she murmured. You didn't say you were going to call out the banker in front of half the town, he said with a grin. She opened her satchel, showing him the deed and notary comparison. It's all here. From behind a barrel, a man stepped forward. Weathered coat, brim pulled low. You ain't the first one Vorn tried to ruin, he said, voice low. Name's Boone. I used to work books for his office. Got fired when I started asking questions about water filings and late fees that didn't add up. Elijah stepped closer. You still got any of those records? Some, Boone replied. But I got something better. A copy of his land audit log shows which properties he's targeting next. Might be enough to get the mayor's attention. Ava exchanged a glance with Elijah. Then we need to take this public. Boone nodded once. Be careful. Vorn don't fight clean. Elijah looked back toward the stage where Vorn had gone pale behind a curtain of polite smiles. Neither did they. Next up was the paperwork. But first, they'd need to make it official, with signatures, witnesses, and one hell of a filing. Because when you fight men like Vorn, the truth has to be louder than the lie. The courthouse in Silver Hollow didn't look like much, just a squat, two-room structure with a tilted roof and a weathered door that squeaked no matter how gently you pushed it. But for Elijah Cross, walking through that door with Ava Talbot and Boone at his side, it might as well have been the Capitol. He handed over the bundle of documents, Niels's map, Ava's deed, the notary's testimony, and Boone's statement, to the clerk behind the desk. The man blinked hard when he saw the names at the top. This a formal water rights challenge? He asked, eyebrows rising. It is, Elijah said. Filed under Silver Hollow Statute 12.6c, with 2 witnesses and recorded property damage tied to tampering. The clerk licked his lips. This is going to make some folks mighty unhappy. Elijah just looked at him. Then it must be working. Outside, the midday sun cast long slashes across the street. Ava pulled her shawl tighter, her face unreadable. You sure that'll be enough? She asked as they stepped into the dusty road. It's a start, Elijah said. Now we make sure Vorn knows he ain't the only one with a pen and a stamp. They rode back to the ranch in near silence, the air too thick with tension to waste on small talk. But when they arrived, the stillness hit them different. No chickens, no dogs barking, no cattle lowing in the pasture. Ava was the first to spot it. Smoke. She bolted toward the barn. Flames were licking up the back wall, dancing high along the loft, casting light across the scorched dirt like devil fire. Elijah grabbed a bucket and ran to the trough, but it was near dry. Useless. Ava, he shouted. Where's the well line? Behind the corral. They worked fast. forming a rhythm. He pumped. She carried. Boone, wheezing from the ride, grabbed a tarp and started swatting the flames. Together they beat back the fire just enough to spare the livestock shed, but the barn was a loss. When the last ember fizzled, Ava sank to her knees in the dirt. "That barn was my father's. He built it after the war." Elijah crouched beside her. "Then we'll build another. Stronger." She didn't speak, but she didn't pull away either. That night, as the stars came out cold and far away, Elijah walked the perimeter of the ranch alone. His boots left soft imprints in the blackened ground. That's when he saw it. A boot print, pressed into the ash near the back fence. It was deeper than his own. Broad heel, narrow toe, the sole worn crooked. He knelt, studying it with practiced eyes. It wasn't just someone fleeing in panic. It was someone waiting. He followed the faint trail up to a notch in the fence and found a sliver of leather caught in the wire. Black. Too smooth for ranch hands. More like town boots. Next morning, Elijah rode into Silver Hollow with that scrap of leather in his vest pocket and a purpose burning behind his eyes. He went straight to the saloon, where Vaughn's hired men liked to loiter. He scanned boots, faces. Nothing stood out, until one man stood to leave and limped slightly. Elijah followed him to the alley behind the general store. The man turned, surprised. "You following me for a reason?" he asked. "Depends," Elijah said, stepping close. "You burn barns for pay, or just for kicks?" The man stiffened. "You got nothing." Elijah pulled out the scrap of leather. "You were sloppy." That's when the man shoved him. Hard. Elijah stumbled, but kept his footing. "I got more," he added, "and I filed it." The man paled, turned, and fled down the alley. Elijah let him go, for now. Back at the ranch, he handed Ava the boot print drawing he'd sketched from memory. "That man works for Vaughn," he said. "Then Vaughn's playing dirtier than we thought." Elijah nodded. "And we're about to show this town what clean looks like. By morning," the town of Silver Hollow buzzed like a hornet's nest kicked off its post. Word of the barn fire had spread, quietly but steadily, and so had whispers of Elijah's filing at the courthouse. No one said Vaughn's name out loud, but you could hear it in the silence that followed any mention of the Talbot girl, or that new cowboy with the stare. Elijah knew something was coming. He just didn't expect it to come with irons. It happened just past noon. He was helping Ava repair a busted rail near the eastern fence when two deputies rode up, dust trailing behind them. One of them, Deputy Brigg, swung down with a folded warrant. "Elijah Cross," he said, too formal for the setting. "You're under arrest for trespassing, unlawful filing of false documents, and theft of bank property." Ava stood, face pale. "That's a lie." Brigg didn't blink. "Ma'am, I suggest you stay back." Elijah raised his hands, calm. "You gonna tell me what I supposedly stole?" Brigg shrugged. "A notary seal. Seems someone filed a complaint saying you faked a lien document and filed it with intention to defraud the bank." Elijah narrowed his eyes. "That's Vaughn's move." "Not my concern," Brigg muttered, snapping iron cuffs around Elijah's wrists. "Come quietly, Mr. Cross." Ava shouted something, but Elijah gave her a look, steady and quiet. "Let it play." They dragged him into town, past people he didn't know but who all watched with the same uneasy expression. The mayor's clerk glanced through a window and vanished behind her curtain. Even the blacksmith, who'd once complimented Jasper's gait, didn't say a word. In jail, the cell smelled of old sweat and rotting paper. Elijah sat on the cot, wrists sore from the cuffs. He breathed deep, forcing calm. The sheriff didn't come, just Brigg and another deputy named Salter playing cards in the other room. Hours passed. Then, near dusk, the door creaked open again. A man entered, lean, gray-bearded, with a cane and a face carved from disappointment and whiskey. He walked slowly, like someone who didn't want to be seen. His coat was too large, his boots scuffed. "You Elijah Cross?" the man asked, not looking up. "That's me." The man leaned against the bars. "Name's Boone. I saw you at the rodeo. Ava said you filed a claim." "I did. You the Boone who used to work Vaughn's books?" Boone nodded. I was his record keeper, knew where every dollar went, until I found a page missing. I asked him about it. Next day I was out on the street. You kept anything? Boone hesitated. I got an affidavit, swore to what I saw, but I ain't signed it yet. Elijah stood. Why not? Boone's voice cracked. 'Cause it don't matter if you win and she still loses her home. I want a promise. Ava keeps the ranch. She don't get bullied out by red tape or sweet talk. Elijah stepped closer. You have my word. Boone looked him in the eye. Something passed between them, a quiet understanding. Boone pulled a folded paper from his coat. It's all there. Vorn rerouted funds meant for loan settlements, created false late notices. I signed this 2 weeks ago, been carrying it around, waiting for a reason. You found one, Elijah said. Boone gave a grim nod. You'll need to bring that to the territorial office. I heard the mayor's holding a public meeting at the general store next week. He wants to clear the air, calm folks down. Perfect, Elijah muttered. We'll clear more than the air. Later that evening, Ava visited the jail, Boone's affidavit and her father's land grant in hand. She spoke to the sheriff, who couldn't look her in the eye, and walked Elijah out with her chin high. I told you, she whispered, as they stepped into the cooling dusk. You were never in this alone. Elijah gave her a quiet smile. Let's finish what we started. Now, with Boone's word on paper and the town set to gather, all they needed was a stage, and the truth was ready to take it. By Friday morning, the general store had been cleared of its usual sacks of flour and barrels of molasses. In their place stood folding chairs and 2 long tables, set end to end with a pot of weak coffee and a stack of folded notices bearing the mayor's seal. Folks from every edge of Silver Hollow came, some curious, some anxious, most just tired of whispers. Mayor Harlan Dorsey stood at the head of the room, flanked by the sheriff and a clerk with ink-stained fingers. Harlan was a man who usually preferred backroom deals and long pauses, but today he looked like a preacher before a restless congregation. We're here, he began, voice unsure, to address some concerns raised about land transfers, water access, and the recent incident at the Talbot Ranch. Ava and Elijah stood near the back, Boone between them. Ava's fingers were white around the edges of her father's deed. Elijah kept his hand close to his coat pocket, where Boone's signed affidavit waited. The mayor continued, droning about allegations and complex filings. It was all noise, until Elijah stepped forward and cleared his throat. Mayor, he said, voice steady, with respect, I think folks here deserve more than legal padding. They deserve facts. All eyes turned. Harlan blinked. Mr. Cross, this isn't a courtroom. No, Elijah interrupted. But it's a town, and it's about time someone told the truth in it. He laid the deed on the table. This document, signed in 1871 and sealed with the original notary mark, confirms the Talbot family's ownership of their land and water rights, specifically the spring Silas Vorn dammed up 3 months ago. He added the old map, traced in Niels's careful hand, and the forged lien notice Ava had kept. This seal doesn't match the one on record. Maureen Keller, your registered notary, confirmed it's a fake. The crowd shifted. Murmurs spread. Harlan frowned, motioning for quiet. Elijah pulled the last sheet from his pocket. Boone stepped forward beside him. This is Boone Hargrove, Elijah said. He used to keep books for Vorn. He was fired for questioning falsified records. He signed this affidavit under penalty of perjury. Boone's voice cracked, but held. Silas reclassified water lines, pocketed money from late fees he made up, told folks their claims had expired when they hadn't. I got pages that match his handwriting across multiple filings. Gasps rose from the back rows. Sheriff Briggs stepped forward now, face pale. That ledger came through our office, didn't it? Ava, calm but fierce, nodded. And we've got a copy. She reached into her satchel and dropped the final piece, a bound ledger with initials, amounts, and notes scribbled in Vorn's florid cursive. Elijah looked at the mayor. You wanted transparency, Harlan. Here it is. Vorn's not just a banker. He's a land thief, A forger and a fraud. You gonna stand with him or with this town? Silence. Then Boone added, almost too quiet. He paid off half the town council last spring. I heard him say it myself. Harlan Dorsey stared at the papers before him. He reached for the affidavit, scanned it, then looked toward Sheriff Brigg. The sheriff cleared his throat. I'll need to take these into custody, pending review. Elijah didn't smile, but his jaw unclenched. The townspeople began to murmur again, this time louder. Some clapped, others stood. One older rancher shook Ava's hand with both of his. Boone leaned close to Elijah. That last ledger? It ain't the only one. Elijah raised an eyebrow. You sure? Boone nodded. You ready for what comes next? Elijah glanced at Ava, who stood tall despite everything. I reckon I am. And outside the wind picked up, not angry now, but shifting, as if the town itself had finally decided to breathe. Monday morning dawned thick with the smell of river fog and fresh paper. Silver Hollow had never been known for justice, but that day, something felt different. The ledger had been turned in, Boone's affidavit signed, and the townsfolk weren't whispering anymore. They were watching. Elijah stood outside the town hall, hat low, boots planted, hands quiet at his sides. Ava was beside him, her hair pulled back, the Talbot deed clutched tight under her arm. Boone sat on a bench nearby, cane across his knees, eyes scanning the street like he expected ghosts. Just past 9, a black wagon with gold trim rolled in slow. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man in a slate coat bearing the seal of the state, a territorial marshal. Marshal Glenn Whitaker, he introduced with a nod. I've come to review a case of alleged land fraud, document tampering, and obstruction. Mayor Dorsey met him at the steps, looking suddenly much smaller than usual. Marshal, we've already begun. No, sir, Whitaker cut in. Now you'll begin. He turned to Elijah. You filed the original complaint? I did, Elijah said calmly, handing over a packet wrapped in twine. All the documents are inside, including notarized statements, land grants, and a copy of the ledger. Whitaker flipped it open, eyes narrowing as he scanned the first few pages. Where's the accused? As if on cue, Silas Vaughan emerged from the bank down the street, 3 of his hired men flanking him. His coat was freshly pressed, but his face held a tightness that had nothing to do with sun or age. Marshal, he called, voice cool and polite. I heard you'd be visitin'. Shame you had to come all this way over hearsay. Whitaker didn't answer immediately. Instead, he held up the ledger, open to a page with Vaughan's signature beside a false loan entry. You'll want to explain this, the marshal said, stepping forward. Vaughan laughed lightly. That ain't my handwriting. Boone stepped from the crowd. Then why does every entry match the flourishes you use on your loan approvals? You forget I copied most of them for 6 years? More murmurs. Whitaker turned to the sheriff. He's your jurisdiction for now. Place him under arrest for fraud, tampering, and criminal misappropriation. Sheriff Brigg hesitated only a second before stepping toward Vaughan. Silas Vaughan, you'll come with me. Vaughan turned, lips curling. You're all fools. You think taking me down changes anything? This town runs on debt, on favors. Ava's voice rang out clear from behind the crowd. No, it used to. Now it runs on truth. Vaughan locked eyes with her. You should have stayed quiet. And you should have stayed honest. As Vaughan was led away, his boots scuffed the wooden steps. It wasn't dramatic, but it was final. The kind of end no one clapped for, but everyone felt. Whitaker turned back to the mayor. I'll be taking full custody of the documents, and I recommend a full audit of every land transaction Vaughan authorized in the last 5 years. Mayor Dorsey swallowed. Understood. Later that afternoon, Ava, Elijah, and Boone sat on the porch of the Talbot Ranch. The wind rustled the dry grass, but the air felt lighter, like it could finally move through again. So that's it? Ava asked, voice quiet. For him, Elijah said. But for you, I'd say it's just the start. She looked down the hill at the pasture, where a few remaining cattle had begun to wander closer to the fence. We lost the barn, half the troughs, I don't know how we'll fix it all. We'll figure it out, he said gently. You've got your name, your land, and your water. That's more than most. Boone lifted a mug of coffee. And you've got help. I may walk like a scarecrow, but I can still mend a gate. Ava smiled, small but real. The past was scarred, but the future had roots, and tomorrow they'd dig them deeper. A week after Silas Vaughn's arrest, Silver Hollow began to breathe like a town waking up from a long, bitter sleep. The dam was broken. The spring at the Talbot Ranch trickled clear and steady again, filling the troughs that had sat bone dry for months. The land, stubborn as ever, responded. Grass greened, birds returned, and the sky didn't feel so heavy anymore. Elijah stood at the top of the pasture, hammer in one hand, a coil of wire slung over his shoulder. The old fence was nearly rebuilt. 3 new posts were set. 4 strands of fresh barbed line stretched tight across the ridge. Below, Ava hauled a bucket of water to the trough, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair tied back in a blue bandana. She glanced up, caught his eye, and smiled, a quiet, knowing thing that said more than words ever could. "You gonna stand there all day or help me with this last rail?" she called, half teasing. "I was admiring the view," Elijah said, tipping his hat, "but I reckon I can lend a hand." They worked side by side, the rhythm of labor smoothing the silence between them. Nails, wood, sweat, simple things, real things. When the fence was finally finished, they leaned against it together, gazing out over the property. "You really think it'll hold this time?" she asked, not looking at him. Elijah shrugged. "Fences are like people. They get broken. You patch them up, you reinforce the weak spots, then you trust they'll hold, even when the weather comes hard." She nodded slowly. "And the town? Still got some repairing to do, but folks saw what truth looks like. That sticks." Boone arrived just after sundown, limping up the drive with a satchel slung over one shoulder and a bag of nails in the other. "Thought I'd bring more supplies," he said, setting them down with a grunt. "And I found your father's branding iron in the barn rubble. A little bent, but I cleaned it up." Ava took it gently from him. The initials, JT, were still legible, the iron cool and blackened, but whole. "Thank you," she whispered. Boone sat on the porch, watching as the stars blinked to life. "You know," he said, "the mayor asked me if I'd help audit the rest of the land records. Told him I'd think on it." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "You gonna do it?" Boone smiled. "Maybe, but only if I can stay here when I'm not in town." Ava chuckled. "We've got an empty bunk in the old smokehouse, long as you don't snore." Elijah stepped off the porch and walked around the side of the barn, rebuilt halfway already. He picked up a brush and a plank, dipped it in fresh black paint, and walked to the front gate. "What are you doing?" Ava asked, joining him. "Markin' what's ours," he said. He nailed the new sign into place, clean and firm against the wood. Talbot and Cross Ava read it once, then again, her hand resting lightly on the post. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She turned to him, eyes glistening. This land didn't need savin', just someone to believe in it. Elijah smiled, slow and steady. "Same goes for people." They stood there a while longer, watching the sky turn deep indigo, the scent of damp earth rising in the air. The spring gurgled in the distance, steady and alive. Jasper whinnied from the far paddock. Silver Hollow still had its problems. There'd be more repairs, more storms, but the worst of the rot had been rooted out, and what was left had a chance to grow. Elijah tipped his hat back, looked at the stars, and exhaled. He never planned to stay, but somehow, without trying, he'd found a home. And this time he wasn't riding on. Not today, not ever. If you believe, cowboys still stand for something, truth, grit, and the kind of decency that doesn't ask for applause. Saddle up and subscribe. We've got more stories to ride through together.